And I think everybody knows me. I know them. That's on there. I'm Jeanette Pincus, and I've been on the committee for the Let There Be Light Menorah project. And I want to thank you all for being with us tonight. This is a session about the 7 branch menorah that's the most enduring symbol of the Jewish people. Our beautiful Berenger Sanctuary is filled with extraordinary symbols of our traditions and history, with our windows, the 10 Commandments, the Jerusalem stone on our bema, but we don't have a menorah. And mostly all the sanctuaries typically have dedicated one in their sanctuary. So for us, it's important to continue beautifying our sanctuary. So we embarked on an effort to create our very own uniquely designed glass mosaic tile representations of the Ben Shon menorah. And that's what we've been showing our electronic and our printed collateral that you've been seeing. What's special about this menorah too is this was something that Rabbi Weinberg, I believe it's the Haggadah that he had growing up. It's a beautiful depiction of the menorah, and this is what Nancy Stanley has been working on to give us, that we'll have 2 different menorah tiles on either side of the bema. And word has it that we kept saying it was being delivered, but I think with all the things that have been happening, it got delayed again, but we're supposed to be getting it within this month. So we'll be able to take a peek at it, and we will have it installed in our sanctuary. We're hoping that then soon, whenever it is safe for us to be back in our sanctuary, that we will celebrate and we'll all get to be there together for it. The most important thing about this program that we were doing too is to get our Anshai community together. And what we did with Talia had 2 other wonderful educators do a program for our children that was done in the December, January time period that was really well received. And now that we're doing this for our adults. The second part of this program also was, this is our fundraiser that we've had for last year and for this year. So we really appreciate your support that you've done for the program. And I want to say too, is we want to, the members of the committee, it's just been wonderful for us to all work together. And that's been Julia Kaufman, Debbie Rajanoff, I mentioned Nancy Stanley, and Marcy Kahn, and our very own Talia Kushnick, who is going to be leading our program tonight. So I'll pass it on back to her.
Thank you, Jeanette. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and joining us for this education session, and just say that I'm so honored to have been a part of this committee and to be able to be learning with you through these various sessions. It's been really fun so far, and I'm excited about this one and then our last one next week. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Jewish people as the people of the menorah. And the menorah has a really rich history. It has been part of our history and our culture since biblical times. It has always been a part of the Jewish landscape. It's followed us throughout our entire history. And what is so interesting to me and what has been so striking that I've learned as I've been doing research for this is that where there have been Jews throughout our entire history, there have been menorahs. And the menorah, it's not just something that's a part of our history, it also kind of tells our story as us as a people and as a nation. So tonight we're really going to explore that and look at how the menorah has kind of always been there. So I want to start by reading a text from Dr. Stephen Fine, who, if anyone has been on any of the previous sessions, we've talked about him a lot. He is kind of the preeminent scholar, modern day scholar of the menorah. He's written lots of books about it. He teaches about it. He's just a wealth of information. And in preparing for these sessions, I read one of his books and read a lot of the things that he wrote beyond the book. And he just knows everything about menorahs. It's really, really remarkable that somebody could study something so deeply. But we're going to be spending a lot of time with Dr. Fine tonight. So let's read this first quote, and it's kind of going to frame what we're going to be doing together. So I'm going to share my screen so we can read it. Okay. So the menorah is the longest continuously used religious symbol in Western culture, which in and of itself is remarkable, that this symbol, which is ours, could hold, this very cool and impressive kind of title of the longest continuously used religious symbol. It is a living and transforming object of memory, beginning in antiquity and continuing through the medieval world to our own. It is a beloved artifact, one whose significance has transformed and continues to transform in our own time. So let's just unpack this for a few minutes, because what he's saying here is that, the menorah really has symbolized so many things to us throughout our history. It's not just a candelabra. It's not just kind of a utility object. It's also not just an artifact that was designed and described to us by God, which also in and of itself is really, remarkable and interesting. But it is really a testament and a witness to, as I was saying before, to our journey as a people and as a nation. And what he says, which is just fascinating, is that it's a living, breathing object of memory. So tonight I really want to do two things. I want to look at what the history of the menorah is, kind of take us backwards in a time machine from where we are in present day, back all the way to biblical times, and look at how the menorah has been with us throughout our entire history, through our entire path from, the creation of the world, us first being, this nation, to where we are today, and how the menorah has been a part of that journey. And then also really explore what it means for something to be a living and transforming object of memory. Because to me, that is a very, very, very compelling statement. So let's first go back all the way to the beginning, to when we're first introduced to the Bible. If anybody was at the 789 session that we did a couple weeks ago, we really looked at the first time that we're introduced to the menorah, which happens in the book of Exodus, when God is describing to Moshe, what items should be placed in the tabernacle. And there's a lot of emphasis on this menorah, exactly what it should look like, what it should be made out of. Every detail is outlined by God. So that's our introduction. That menorah is then created, and it sits in the tabernacle and is with us as we journey through Egypt. There are then menorahs in the first temple, and then of course menorahs in the second temple. So let's look here. I'm going to share my screen again. Here we have our earliest depiction of the Second Temple menorah. So these coins are from 140 BCE, and they were coins that were used during the Second Temple period. So this is the Second Temple menorah is kind of the menorah that we latch onto, right? This is the one that has kind of stayed with us in image-wise. And this is the first depiction of it. So while this is the earliest depiction that we have, it is by far not the most famous. So if we think about it again, we just kind of outlined the history, but the next step after the Second Temple is the destruction of the Second Temple. And so we all know that when the Second Temple was destroyed and we were exiled, that kind of image has been commemorated in the Arch of Titus. So for any of you who are not familiar with what the Arch of Titus is, it is a structure that's in Rome. And it was built in 81 CE by the Emperor Titus's younger brother, Domitian, after Titus died, and it commemorates this joyous victory that the Romans had after they destroyed the temple, destroyed Jerusalem, and they are, bringing all of the temple goods, the artifacts, the spoils of war, as it was, back to Rome. And we see in the Arch of Titus, we see portrayed this triumphant procession of the Romans carrying all these spoils of war back home. So let's read a source, again by Dr. Fine, that speaks to this. So he writes, Titus may have thought removing the menorah from Jerusalem in 70 CE would break or at least tame the Jews. Instead, the menorah prevailed as a major symbol of Judaism, from Second Temple period coins around Jerusalem, which we just saw, to mosaic synagogue floors, from tombstones where a menorah identified a Jewish body, to symbolic designs in medieval rabbinic commentary on the Torah. So what we see down here, if you see the image, we see the Menorah Relief on the Arch of Titus, and you can see the menorah displayed prominently. And this depiction of the Second Temple menorah has become the de facto image of the menorah. When we think of the menorah, this is what we think of. Not necessarily the biblical menorah, but the Second Temple menorah. And because we have this Arch of Titus, because we have this Menorah Relief, this image, it's really stuck with us. And we start to see, as Dr. Fine is saying, after the destruction of the temple, we start to see images of the menorah pop up all over the ancient Near East. And the question is really why? What is it about the menorah that stuck with us as a people, right? Why is it this artifact, this religious artifact that, we start seeing all over the ancient Jewish communities? So we're going to read a text by Sean Burris, who kind of speaks to this point. And he says, the popularity of the menorah is best explained as the result of several factors. First, the menorah was a prominent sacred vessel in both the temple and ancient synagogues. Furthermore, the menorah was easily the most distinct and recognizably Jewish object in antiquity. The Jewish God was imageless, and the menorah had the advantage of being simple in form, easy to depict, and unique to the Jewish religion. So here he's really outlining kind of two reasons why the menorah had become this really popular image that we start seeing all over Jewish communities, ancient Jewish communities. First, at this time, at first, second century, the menorah already has a really long, old history, right? We're talking biblical times. So it's already really important, significant to the Jewish people. And two, as Jews, we know that we are prohibited from placing images of God in our sanctuaries, in our holy spaces. We do not worship images. So we have this tradition of placing beautiful ritual, religious objects and artifacts in our sacred spaces, in our sanctuaries. So the menorah kind of becomes the thing that we start replicating and putting all over the place. So we see them in first century Jerusalem, right? We just saw the coins, and then that continues. And then we start seeing them all over Israel and other places. So what we want to do now is we're going to take a tour through time and space to kind of look at where we see menorahs throughout history and the various uses. Let me share my screen again. So here, let's look at these first three images on the top, because I think they tell a really, really important story that kind of helps us to contextualize what's happening with the menorah at this time in history. So first we see I'm going to use my pointer here. So first we see the menorah on a tomb in Tiberius, in Tavaria. So this is in northern Israel. In the middle here, we see an image of the menorah from what is now currently Turkey, from the 4th century. And here we see a bull from Rome. So these 3 images on the top, the thing that struck me the most when I saw this was, one, these places are far away from each other. And we're talking about a time when it was not easy to travel. So to get from Israel to Turkey to Rome, that is hard. That takes a long time. That takes resources. This is not people that are just traveling because they want to see the world. And also the people that are living in these countries are speaking different languages. They have different cultures. But the thing that's uniting them, the thing that's the same in all of these places, is that they're sharing this same religious culture, this same religious imagery. And that's really remarkable, that the menorah already this early on had gained this kind of popularity and had become the image that we're going to put as Jews, we're going to use to demarcate ourselves as Jews, to decorate our synagogues, our tombs, our whatever it is. This is our image. This is what we're going to use. And so if we continue to look at it through history, we see it on a ring in the 5th century, on synagogue floors in Israel in the 6th and 8th century. You can see some of these. If you go to Israel, you can see some of these mosaics. We see it in a ketubah in the 11th century, in a Hebrew primer in the 12th century, on a stone in Spain. Maybe this was on somebody's home, a Jewish person's home, or in a synagogue in the 14th century. We see it on a kashrut seal from Ukraine in the 17th century, and then again on a gambling token from Thailand in the 18th century. And these are just a couple images that I chose. If you were to Google this, you would see hundreds and hundreds of images throughout history, throughout the world, but it's all telling the same story. We are seeing here how prevalent and how widespread the image of the menorah has been and was throughout history. And it continues to be that way. We ourselves at Anshai Torah are adding ourselves to this narrative by putting a menorah up in our sanctuary. We're doing the exact same thing that we've just seen Jewish communities doing for thousands of years all over the world. So I want to argue that we are the people of the menorah for 2 reasons. One, because it is our history, right? We've just seen that. Where there are Jews, there are menorahs. Where there have been Jews, there have been menorahs. And 2, now it's time to unpack that second statement that Dr. Fine said in the text that we read at the beginning, that it is a living, breathing testament to our history. It has meant different things to us. The menorah has meant different things to us at different times throughout our history. As we've changed, our relationship to the menorah has changed. And we're going to look at that right now. The best way that I think we can look at this is to really do a deep dive into the Arch of Titus. So to go back to the arch that we looked at a couple minutes ago with the image of the Second Temple menorah, and really look at how that, as one symbol, this one piece of history, has changed and has reflected how we see ourselves in the political and sociological climate that we found ourselves in as Jews. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to look very closely at the Arch of Titus, at the Menorah Relief, okay? So if we look here, we see, this is the Menorah Relief of the Arch of Titus. So we see here various artifacts from the Second Temple. The menorah, we see trumpets, this is a table that was used, we see signposts, and we see the Roman soldiers who we talked about before triumphantly bearing these spoils of war back to Rome. And the menorah is really the most prominent and the clearest image out of all of them, right? So what is so interesting when we look at this is that, you know, we can look at it and we can zero in on the menorah right away, but we're not the only people that are able to do that. When they created this relief, there was a reason that they made the menorah so prominent and so visible at the center of this image. because just looking at it told a story. Just seeing the menorah showed people, Jews, Romans, people all over the world alike, what happened. It signified the Roman victory over the Jews, the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Jerusalem, and more than that, the destruction of the Jewish God. Because if we think about it, this was a holy war that was going on. It wasn't just about conquering more land. This told a statement: which God is stronger, which God is more powerful. And just by looking at this, to the Romans, we see a great victory, not just in terms of politics and warfare, but in terms of this statement of what they did to the Jewish God. And to the Jews, it really puts them in their place, because they thought they were powerful. They thought their God was all powerful. They were the chosen people, but you can't be a chosen people when you see this image. So it was very degrading to the Jews, and it was a very celebrated image to Romans and to others alike. This arch stood throughout history, throughout time, as a reminder to Jews of what we had and what we lost. And the arch itself was used to subjugate Jews, to put them in their place, to make them see exactly where they were in relation to others at the time. And it was used that way for a long time. So in the Middle Ages, there was this tradition that the Romans had of when they appointed a new pope, they would have the head of the Roman Jewish community present the pope with a Torah scroll. By doing this, they defined themselves, as the people of the book, as Jewish people, really kind of put themselves out there that way. And as they handed the Torah to the Pope, the Pope would let it fall to the ground. Again, a statement of exactly where the Jewish God stands in relation to their God. And this happened, this lovely ceremony that they would do happened under the Arch of Titus. So, this location was used to really demoralize Jews and to put them in their place. But if there is anything that we know about Jews throughout our history, is that we are survivors and we are resilient. And we, as I was saying before, as we felt differently about ourselves, our place in society, we kind of projected those feelings onto the Arch of Titus, onto the Menorah Relief. So here's another quote by Stephen Fine. He writes, "At least from the Renaissance on, some Jews chose not to see Romans carrying the menorah at all. Rather, they imagined that the menorah bearers are actually Jews, members of a strong nation, Jewish prisoners bearing their holy vessels into captivity with their own strength." So this is a very small, subtle change in the perception on the part of Jews at the time, but it's really empowering. They are not just this powerless people that are at the mercy of their captors, but they are injecting themselves into the story, right? They are still part of their own narrative. And it's this small injection of hope that really changes the way that they related to this place, to this image, to this menorah. And this was just the beginning. I mean, the Jews continued to kind of use this menorah relief to envision, where they stood in society, to gain strength. And let's look at this next one, because it's remarkable. So Fine again, he says, in 1947, Holocaust survivors in Rome marched through the arch from west to east, symbolically carrying the menorah back to Zion as they celebrated the United Nations vote to establish a Jewish state. They turned the Arch of Titus from a symbol of Jewish degradation into an icon of hope for a better Jewish future. I mean, it's just remarkable. This is the same arch, it's the same image of the menorah, but it has changed dramatically in its meaning and significance to us. As we changed, we read this totally differently. So here we are reclaiming this image. We are marching it backwards, marching it back to our homeland from when it was first taken 2,000 years ago by the Romans when we were exiled. Now we are claiming this. We are going to get this Jewish state, and we are going to march our artifacts, our rightful artifacts, back to where they belong. And it's really, I think, so inspiring and remarkable. And it doesn't stop there. So if we look at these two images that we have, on the left-hand side, we see a pamphlet from the Liberation Medal on the 10-year anniversary of the state of Israel. And if you look in the background, it's not the best picture, so you have to look a little closely, but you see this is our Menorah Relief that we've just been looking at. And we see here the Roman soldiers who then turned into Jewish prisoners, morphing into Israeli soldiers who are marching to our homeland to defend it and protect it. They are literally marching our menorah back home. And then, of course, on the right, we see the arch menorah again in the state of Israel's national emblem, front and center, very prominent for all to see. And we're continuing to do this, right? So here is our menorah. This is the menorah that's going to go into our sanctuary very shortly. Whenever it arrives here, it will be in our sanctuary. And so this story of the menorah is continuing with us. And as we add our menorah to our sanctuary, we are joining our ancestors in using the image of the menorah to beautify our sanctuary and to define ourselves as Jews, as the people of the menorah. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And I know that we are a small crowd, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Yeah, Jeanette. Jeanette, we can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. This is about the Arch of Titus. What's the legend? What happened to that menorah when they brought it back to Rome?
Oh my gosh. If you read the book by Stephen Fine, he spends like hundreds of pages talking about it. So there's like all of these kind of legends and beliefs. So some people believe that it's like in the basement of the Vatican, which Stephen Fine says is not true. What he says is that all of the temple artifacts were actually on display in some Roman temple for a while, and that for a while, actually, Jews would come and visit it. They would visit all of the temple artifacts that were there, and then at some point, they were in some point in Roman history, and I don't remember the exact details, they were stolen from that temple in Rome and destroyed. But he probably wrote exactly when, but I don't remember the exact details.
Because I remember when I went there, I think the guy said they threw it in the water. And I'm thinking, why didn't we, why didn't they go back in there and look in the river, whatever that river was? But I thought that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
so
that's what he said.
I like that makes better explanation.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's actually like a real great account of what happened with it, But good question.
Okay, thank you. Well, I was curious about that. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Do you think, Talia, that that the menorah holds the same, like mystery and appeal, like to our generation, to the next generation? Like, is it meaningful to you in that way as a symbol?
Well, yes, like, I think it is a very recognizably Jewish symbol. And, in the times that I've visited Israel and seen like the giant menorah outside the Knesset, there's a reason why Israel as a state chose it to be the symbol, and there is that giant one outside the Knesset. I think it's hard to separate the menorah. I think we kind of take it for granted when we think about Judaism. Like it's definitely one of the most recognizable and universally recognizable symbols. When I was, doing research to learn about this, I didn't know all of the history, and it's fascinating, and really the context and the history really made me appreciate it so much more. But I think that for me personally, and for a lot of people, it's just kind of a word that we all know. It's an image we can all kind of call to mind. And there's a reason why, when it first came up, talking to Rabbi Weinberg about, what kind of artwork we wanted to put in our sanctuary, the kind of the first thing he said was, we need a menorah. So, probably if we went around to, a lot of modern day synagogues, we would see it there in one form or another too.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's oh wait, am I interrupting someone?
I don't think so.
Because I'm thinking I don't use that image a lot, like the center and all the parts, the different branches coming out from it. Like there's so much for us to use there, just in our thinking, and so I'm excited about that. Just like we talked about the windows so much.
Right. When we did it for the kids in December, they made art projects that kind of looked like the menorah that we're going to be putting up. So, but for the older kids, it wasn't just creating the art. It was also kind of thinking about what each of the branches could signify as something that's important to us. So if we wanted to take, 7 things, what would we put in the middle, and what would each of the different branches symbolize?
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I think there's so much, with anything in Judaism, like there's just so much that we can do to make it relevant to our lives and find meaning in it.
I just had something to say that reminded me of Cindy's question. Is I know living in New York, there are a lot of tours of Jewish New York and other places, and you'll see buildings all throughout the 5 boroughs that are no longer synagogues and things like that. But whoever takes on those properties, whether it becomes a church or something else, you'll see still on those buildings menorahs and Jewish stars and other things that they know that there's importance.
Yeah.
And they leave it there. So I kind of find that fascinating too.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being here. Jeanette, do you have anything else to say?
Oh, yes, I just want Talia, thank you. It was delightful, and I want to. I see somebody. Yes.
Talia, I have a question. So what did the children come up with the 7 branches? What did they think that they represented?
Well, we got a lot of do you guys hear the echo, or is it just me? I'm not quite sure. Did it stop? Okay. We got a lot of, friends, family, some of those more beautiful, but kind of general. And then we got some things that were more, specific, either kind of silly or kind of, meaningful to kids. So, some things would be like my Xbox, but then, like the things that were important to them, that they, whatever it was, but it was kind of those kid answers. But I think it did get them thinking about, if you had to whittle down, to your 7 most important things in your life, what would they be? So I think that could be a great thought exercise for all of us, not just for the kids.
A follow-on to that. Do you know the reason why we didn't put a menorah on the front of the building as opposed to a Hanukkah?
I do not know the reason for that.
I do not know.
I think if I were to guess, I would say probably because for Hanukkah, you want to publicize the miracle, so you want to make everybody be able to see your Chanukiah when you're lighting it. So that's a really great thing to have in a public place. but I don't know if that was the thinking behind it, you know, why they chose one over the other. I really don't.
Thank you, sweetie.
Thanks. All right, Jeanette, you're up.
Okay, now Talia, thank you so much. This was delightful tonight. I loved it. And I want to remind everybody that our last session is Wednesday, March. Do I have the right date? March 10th. Is that right?
10th. Next
Right.
Wednesday, I think.
Yes. Okay. On March 10th for the people of the Menorah. So
No, next week is
7,
7,
8,
8, 9.
7, 8, 9. See, okay. Thank you guys. I'm reading the whole thing.
That's what I did today.
Okay. Guys, thank you. It was wonderful to see everybody. And again, thank you guys so much for supporting our fundraiser and this educational program too. It was great to see everybody.
Thank you, Talia.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice seeing everybody.
Yes.